Hello there and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Al24 News, streaming live from the capital Algiers. I'm Abdurrahim Kashour, and coming up next, our news program. The summit of the heads of the state and government of the African Union decided today in the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa to suspend granting Zionist entity observer status in the Union and to form a board of 7 heads of state to study the issue later on. Russia has assembled about 70% of the military forces needed for a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in the coming weeks. The ground is expected to freeze and harden from mid-February, enabling Moscow to bring in more heavy equipment. A large part of Ukraine's most productive agricultural land is concentrated in its eastern regions. And it is precisely those parts of the possible Russian attack which will lead to a food crisis in the country. Morocco will rescue ants in tragedy as 5-year-old Ryan is brought out dead after 5 days underground, breaking the house of workers who had dug for days to reach him and people around the world. The legend Lata Mangashka passed away on Sunday, February 6th, leaving behind a long legacy of songs and melodies that will resound in the ears of Indians for decades to come. Hello again and welcome. Those were today's headline. The AU summit suspended the decision granting observer status to Zionists and set up a board of 7 heads of state, including Algeria. The decision adopted by agreement today by the summit of heads of state and government of the AU taken by Moussa Faki. Creation of a commission of 7 African heads of state to make a recommendation to AU summit, which remains held of the issue. The board will be composed as follows: President Macky Sall, current chairman of the AU; President Abdelmajid Tebboune, Algeria; President Cyril Ramaphosa, South Africa; President Paul Kagame, Rwanda; President Felix Tshisekedi from Democratic Republic of Congo; President Muhammadu Buhari from Nigeria; President Paul Biya from Cameroon. President Macky Sall will take the initiative to launch the work of this committee.
The 35th African Union session that began Saturday in Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa, which discussed many issues and emphasized the Palestinian file's suspended Zionist entity observer status. Palestine on Saturday called on the African Union to retract its decision to grant Zionists observer status in the Pan-African Organization. Macky Sall, President of the Republic of Senegal, was elected as the new chairperson of the African Union for the year 2022, took the decision in which the AU suspended observer status to Zionist entity and set up a committee of 7 heads of states, including Algeria, to make a recommendation to the AU summit about the issue. On the other hand, Algeria called for the finalization of the second African counter-terrorism plan, the activation of the African Special Fund to combat terrorism, the development of an African list of persons and groups involved in terrorism, and the implementation of the African arrest warrant. President of the Republic Abdelmajid Tebboune, in a report presented by the Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Ramtan Lamamra, said the battle against terrorism violent extremism can't be won without a comprehensive approach that goes beyond the security dimension to address the structural factors and root causes of radicalization and violent extremism. Moussa Faki pointed to legal and political limits that impact the powers and leadership of the AU Commission on matters of regional and continental importance.
To a different matter now, while Russia is not yet capable of mounting a total invasion of Ukraine, portions of its army have reached full combat strength and appear to be in the final stages of readiness for military action. The deployment of Russian troops means that Russia could soon be fully prepared to begin military movement sideway about 800 miles of Ukraine's eastern and southern borders. Russia sent a pair of long-range nuclear-capable bombers on patrol over its ally Belarus amid escalation tensions over Ukraine. The Russian Defense Ministry said that the Tu-22 M3 bombers practiced cooperation with Belarusian Air Force and Air Defense during a 4-hour mission. The flight followed several similar patrols over Belarus, which borders Ukraine to the north. The first units of the American forces that Washington sent to Poland to the contest of strengthening the American military presence in Eastern Europe have arrived, according to Polish news agency. The first group of members of the 82nd Airborne Division of the U.S. Airborne Forces arrived at Jasonka Airport, about 70 kilometers from the Polish-Ukrainian border. Ukraine has been known as the breadbasket of Europe for centuries. Its fast-growing agricultural exports, such as wheat and other grains, are essential to feeding many countries from Africa to Asia. A large part of Ukraine's most productive agricultural land is concentrated in the eastern regions, and it's precisely those parts that are most vulnerable to a possible Russian attack. Hassan Burkan on What's Follow.
As clouds of war gather along Ukraine's border, one concern that has been relatively unnoticed is the question of what will happen to these regions and how this will affect the many countries that depend on Ukraine for their food in a state of global inflation and rising prices. Ukraine is the largest exporter of corn, barley and rye, but it is the country's wheat that has the greatest impact on food security worldwide. In 2020, Ukraine exported nearly 18 million tons of wheat out of a total harvest of 24 million tons, making it the world's fifth largest exporter. Notable customers are China and the European Union, but the developing world is where Ukrainian wheat has become a major import.
About half of the wheat consumed in Lebanon in 2020 came from Ukraine, according to data from the Food and Agriculture Organization, as Lebanon relies on bread and other grain products for 35% of its food.
Of the 14 countries that depend on Ukrainian imports for more than 10% of their wheat consumption, a large number are already facing food insecurity due to ongoing political instability or direct violence.
Yemen and Libya import 22% and 43% respectively of their total wheat consumption from Ukraine. Egypt is the largest consumer of Ukrainian wheat, importing more than 3 million tons in 2020, about 14% of its total wheat, according to FAO data. Malaysia depends on Ukraine for its wheat consumption by 28%, Indonesia depends on Ukrainian wheat by 28%, while the share of Ukrainian wheat in Bangladesh is 21% in 2020.
Unfortunately, much of Ukrainian's wheat production comes from the historical breadbasket in the east of the country located to the west of Donetsk and Luhansk, which are already controlled by Russian-backed forces. If a possible attack on Ukraine turns into a Russian land grab where Russian-backed separatists have already established their so-called republics, it could mean sharp declines in wheat production and a sharp drop in wheat exports, as farmers flee fighting and destroyed infrastructure, and the region's economy will be paralyzed.
The race to save a 5-year-old boy who fell 32 meters down a well in Morocco ended up in a tragedy on Saturday when he was found, unfortunately, dead.
Ryan, the boy who spent 5 days trapped in a well in Morocco, has died. After a long rescue operation that took 4 days and 4 nights, rescuers managed to bring the 5-year-old boy out of the well. Millions worldwide watching a live video feed from the scene held their breath as rescuers and a medical team emerged from a tunnel carrying Ryan Al-Ram, who had been trapped since Tuesday. The rescue operation was constantly delayed due to rocks and imperiled by the threat of landslide. Workers with mechanical diggers had been trying round the clock to rescue the 5-year-old child after he fell into a 32-meter deep well in the hills near Chefchaouen on Tuesday. Rescue crews using bulldozers and front-end loaders excavated the surrounding red earth down to the level where the boy was trapped and dug horizontally toward him by hand. The boy was wrapped in a yellow blanket after he emerged from a tunnel dug specifically for the rescue and was immediately taken by ambulance to a helicopter where he was transported to the nearest hospital. Shortly before the palace issued a statement confirming his death. Moroccan King Mohammed VI made a phone call to Khalid al-Ram and Wasima Kharshish, Ryan's parents, to offer his condolences to the family over the boy's tragic passing.
On this sad occasion, His Majesty the King has expressed his condolences and sincere sympathy to all members of the family.
Thousands of people had gathered and even camped in solidarity around the site in recent days, and onlookers applauded to encourage the rescuers, sang religious songs and prayed.
He rests in peace. Tunisian President Kais Saied decided to dissolve the Supreme Judicial Council, an independent body responsible for appointing judges, accusing it of being biased and the service of certain interests. The President Kais Saied, in a video released overnight in which he is seen chatting with ministers on Sunday, that the Judicial Supreme Council is something of the past from this moment on. He also accuses the independent constitutional body of corruption and of having slowed down procedures, including investigations into the assassination of left-wing activists in 2013. Following the murder of young Congolese immigrants on one of the most famous beaches in Rio, thousands of demonstrators took the streets of Nemours of Brazil's largest town to decry racist violence. Islam Seed on What Follow.
After the brutal killing of a 24-year-old Congolese refugee who's beaten to death after had been assaulted by 3 men at a beach kiosk where he used to work last month, his death sparked outrage across the country. Huge protests organized by families took streets of many cities, including Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo and Brasilia, the capital, seeking justice for the victim. The young man's death sparked anti-racism protests as well, with many criticizing the all-too-common situation of a black man being killed. According to protesters, the government must act, including the president, who's seeking the second mandate. Protesters say his silence on this case is a proof about his carelessness.
He was treated like an animal, like a thing, just because he was claiming 2 days of overdue wages, some $20. We are all here because we want black people to be treated like humans. Moise could have been my son, my brother, my cousin.
The country's east has been torn apart for decades due to the conflicts between ethnic groups. In recent years, Brazil has seen an upsurge in the number of Congolese and Cameroonian migrants attempting the overland journey to the U.S. border.
According to health experts, the death of 2 from contaminated cocaine in Argentina, Buenos Aires, rose to 23 on Friday, with 37 others remaining hospitalized. Officials warned recent cocaine consumers in and around the capital city of discard the purchase. Islam Seed again.
The death toll among dozens of individuals who drank cocaine presumably laced with opiates in Buenos Aires increased to 23 on Friday, according to health officials, with 37 remaining in hospital. Officials said 20 males and 3 women ranging in age from 21 to 58 have died as a result of contaminated cocaine purchased from traffickers in the poor area of Loma Hermosa since Tuesday night. More than 200 additional persons sought medical attention after taking the substance, displaying varied degrees of severity in their symptoms. In a raid, police recovered more than 20,000 dosages of cocaine, but have not stated how many of them were from the tainted batch.
I'm here as a mother, supporting him, heartbroken because I don't like seeing my son like this. I would give anything not to see my son like that, but we support him.
Local news agencies said that 13 people were detained in a police operation to determine the sources of the contaminated substance. The event has highlighted the consequences of illegal drug usage, particularly cheap, low-quality cocaine supplied and consumed in Buenos Aires' poorest neighborhoods.
This tragedy of nearly 30 deaths and more than 80 poisoned people, which could have spread in the form of a massacre, is unprecedented in Argentina.
In the South American country, illegal drug usage is on the increase.
The destiny of Argentina will be the formation of oligopolies of these gangs, and what we see as small images in Rosario will spread in the city of Buenos Aires and in the province of Buenos Aires and the rest of the country, which is not exempted.
According to security head Sergio Berni, at least 250,000 doses of cocaine are sold every day in Buenos Aires province, which is a home to around 40% of Argentina's 45 million people and has severe poverty rates.
As the state grapples with the spike in violence, authorities announced on Saturday 16 people were killed in Zacatecas, Mexico Central State, after an outright violent argument between criminal gangs. 10 bodies were discovered wrapped in blankets in the streets, while another 6 were suspended inside a warehouse in the nearby community of Panfilo Nitara, according to the state prosecutor Francisco Morillo. Thousands of Canadians opposed to COVID-19 vaccination mandates and other public health restrictions protested in cities across the country, while some organizers said they will continue the rallies until the federal government lifts all pandemic strict measures.
Thousands of Canadians opposed to vaccine mandates have hit the streets of cities between the western province of Alberta to Quebec City in trucks, tractors, cars and on foot to protest the nation's COVID-19 restrictions. The Freedom Convoy was initially started by truckers against the recent mandate requiring drivers entering Canada to be fully vaccinated or face testing and quarantine requirements.
I feel we should all be free people. I don't want to live in a communist country. People should be able to make their own choice if to take the needle or not take the needle and not lose the job, not lose their house, not lose their income. Just for the vaccination.
Demonstrators reached Ottawa, Canada's capital, last weekend, and its organizers said the protests will remain there and elsewhere if necessary.
We are fed up with these restrictions since 2 years. Everywhere, lockdown, curfew. You know what I mean.
Everything has been lockdown, in person, lockdown again, spending like days and weeks in my bedroom and then going all the way back to school and still feeling isolated.
Ottawa's police chief called it a nationwide rebellion driven by madness, claiming his city was under siege and would need more reinforcements beyond those it had already received from other police forces. He vowed to prosecute cops who support the Freedom Convoy, including giving them water to drink.
There is no supply of food, water, fuel, logistics, or anything else that relates to enabling this demonstration by any member of the Ottawa Police Service or any other police service that I am aware of.
Several trucks blocked major intersections for hours across the country. Police reported problems clearing the way for emergency vehicles close to the protest, warning again in a statement this was unacceptable and will not be tolerated.
Despite a temporary work stoppage by rights police officer in Notre Dame, a rally against government coronavirus measures is set to go today evening. The town anticipated 50,000 people attending the protest march, which began at midday in the city centre and traveled via the city Williamsburg and Erasmusbrug, as well as Nederland, Rotterdam, Zuid. The famous 11 million follower podcast Joe Rogan issued an apology on Instagram Saturday after a compilation of podcasts where he issued a racial insult was widely shared on social media. The slander was repeated 20 times in the clips taken from different episodes, which were collected over a 12 years period. In his apology, the YouTuber said it was the most shameful and unfortunate things he has ever had to address publicly.
I'm making this video to talk about the most regretful and shameful thing that I've ever had to talk about publicly. There's a video that's out that's a compilation of me saying the N-word. It's a video that's made of clips taken out of context of me of 12 years of conversations on my podcast, and it's all smushed together, and it looks horrible, even to me. Now, I know that to most people, there's no context where a white person is ever allowed to say that word, never mind publicly on a podcast. And I agree with that now. I haven't said it in years, but for a long time, when I would bring that word up, like if it would come up in conversation.
Now, France will host the first summit of the Forum of Islam, a new body that aims to reshape life for Muslims in the country and rid the religion of extremism. The meeting in Paris, the working groups will focus on the training of imams, clerks and employed in prisons, hospitals, as well as military and mosque security and discrimination against Muslims. Critics see the initiative will control Islam, and it's another example of institutionalized discrimination that holds the whole community responsible for the violent attack of a few. The lower part of the steel sculpture, or let me say the sculpture in the town of Ambais, where Emir Abdelkader was imprisoned from 1848 to 1852, was badly damaged in the attack, which comes in the midst of the election campaign dominated by harsh bombast on immigration and Islam. Ambais Maya Thierry Bouchard said he was ashamed of those responsible and decided to proceed with installation ceremony regardless. Costa Ricans are set to vote for a new president in election that they have yet to see a clear favorite emerge among the 25 candidates and will be held amid the fears of low turnout because of the surge in COVID-19 cases. Usama Ayadi.
Costa Ricans will vote for a new president Sunday in elections that have yet to see a clear favorite emerge among the 25 candidates and will be held amid fears of low turnout because of a surge in COVID-19 cases. Costa Ricans will also choose a new National Assembly in the election, which will take place days after the country's top prosecutor filed papers seeking to lift outgoing President Carlos Alvarado's immunity so he can face charges related to the collection of personal information on citizens. He's not eligible to run again. A large proportion of the electorate remained undecided in the final days before the vote in the Central American nation. If no candidate captures at least 40% of the vote, a runoff vote will be held on April the 3rd between the top two candidates. No single candidate was even close to that threshold in recent polls. In addition to voter apathy, turnout remains uncertain because new COVID-19 infections are running around 6,000 a day. An election official had encouraged those infected to abstain from voting, but others have acknowledged there's no way to keep people from exercising their constitutional right. Polls are scheduled to be open from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Sunday. Costa Ricans living abroad cast ballots Saturday in the country's consulates. Unlike many of its volatile Central American neighbors, Costa Rica, which has no army, has had no armed conflict since 1948 and no dictator since 1919. But the worsening economic situation has hit confidence in the political class. Unemployment has been steadily rising for more than a decade and reached 14.4% in 2021. Apathy and abstentionism are features of Costa Rican elections. In 2018, 34% of voters stayed away, though participation is technically obligatory.
Guinea's Transitional Assembly met for the first time on Saturday with the goal of organizing a return to civilian rule following President Alpha Conde's military takeover last year. According to the local media reports, all 81 members of the National Transitional Council, also known as the CNT in French, were present for the opening session in the capital Conakry Parliament's building. Advocates said that despite congressional leaders' heated opposition, apartheid charge against Zionists will not go away, or let me say, will not go away. In Washington, D.C., a new bilateral agreement appeared on Capitol Hill this week condemning Amnesty International over this situation.
An image of a new bipartisan agreement appeared on Capitol Hill this week, condemning Amnesty International over its report accusing Zionist entity of committing the crime of apartheid against Palestinians. In its February 1st report, Amnesty mentioned Zionist entity is committing the crime of apartheid towards Palestinians within the occupied Palestinian territories. Dozens of U.S. lawmakers, including legislators and heads of key committees in the House of Representatives and Senate, have released statements rejecting Amnesty's findings, as well as some accusing the group of fueling anti-Semitism. Amnesty International USA released a statement in response to congressional concerns earlier this week, stressing that the group's sole mandate is to document human rights abuses wherever they occur. The US government is uniquely placed to meaningfully pressure Zionist authorities to repeal discriminatory laws and policies, issue reparations where appropriate, and uphold its obligations under international human rights and humanitarian law. It is also stated that its report does not argue that the situation in Palestine is the same or equivalent to the system of apartheid, oppression and domination as perpetrated in South Africa between 1948 and 1994. Palestinian rights advocates had been counting on the rise of progressives who have tried to push human rights issues to the fore within the Democratic Party to shake Washington's unconditional support for the Zionists.
Cyclone Batsirai made landfall in Madagascar's eastern area on Saturday, bringing strong gusts and heavy rain. The island nation's second storm is in many weeks. Batsirai made landfall in the Manana-Jewelry area with widespread devastation warnings. Chinese President Xi Jinping officially opened the Beijing Winter Games on Friday with a spectacular visual event and an appeal from Thomas Bach, president of the International Olympic Committee, to give a chance for peace. Many countries, especially the United States, did not send government officials as a gesture of protest against China's human rights record, particularly threats to invade Taiwan, suppress Hong Kong's democratic movement, and persecution of ethnic minorities such as Uyghurs. Elizabeth II, the Queen of United Kingdom, hopes to make the Cornwall will be known as the Queen Consort when Prince Charles takes the throne. In an honest message marking the 70th anniversary of her reign, the monarch made clear her desire, ambiguously paving the way for Queen Camilla. The longest ruling British monarch celebrates 70 years on the throne. The Platinum commemoration will be celebrated in June in the UK as people mark the day with street parties and long weekend. Let's follow this portrait with Miriam Zia.
Queen Elizabeth II is the United Kingdom's longest reigning royal and among the world's longest ruling monarchs in history. The UK has been led by 14 different prime ministers during the 70 years of Queen Elizabeth's reign. On the death of her father, King George VI, Elizabeth II became queen on February 6, 1952, at the age of 25. Elizabeth was formally crowned as Queen of the United Kingdom and regnant of 7 Commonwealth countries. In 2015, she became the UK's longest ruling monarch, overtaking her great-great-grandmother Queen Victoria, who reigned for more than 63 years. Elizabeth's education was supervised by her mother, who entrusted Elizabeth and her sister Marion Crawford to a governess. During World War II, she and her sister Princess Margaret Rose were forced to spend much of their time away from London and away from their parents, principally at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. The year 1992 was marked by numerous scandals within the royal family. 3 of their children broke up with their spouses, including Diana and Charles. In August 31, 1997, Princess Diana of Wales tragically died in a car crash in Paris, and Britain awakened in grief. Following Lady Diana's death, 2.5 billion people attended her funeral, which shocked the House of Windsor. While the entire world was struck with grief upon the death of the princess, Queen Elizabeth did not react to her death, infuriating people and changing people's perspective on the royals. In April 2011, Prince William, the Queen's first grandson, got married to Kate Middleton. The wedding of the century is followed by almost 2 billion viewers all over the world, offering a modern face to the royal family. The toxic press environment in Britain led Prince Harry, grandson of the Queen, and his wife Meghan to step back from the royal family at the very beginning of 2020. And in April 2021, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh and husband of Queen Elizabeth II, died peacefully at the age of 99 at Windsor Castle, 3 weeks after spending a month in the hospital for an infection and a heart disease. 2022 marks the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, a celebration of her 70 years on the throne. However, the Queen will not celebrate it on the 6th of January, as it coincides with her father's death anniversary.
And for more now international news updates, let's follow this report by Zahra Furjani.
Vote to fill the Dublin City Council seat left vacant following the death of Charity Chief Executive Anthony Flynn 6 months ago is to go ahead on Monday night following several controversial deferrals. The nomination with a long-time volunteer with the now wound-up charity, Inner City Helping Homeless, is being suggested as the preferred candidate to fill the seat of the late councillor and charity CEO at the council's monthly meeting. Britain's Prince Charles has paid tribute to his mother Queen Elizabeth II as she marks her 70th anniversary on the throne on Sunday, saying her devotion continues to inspire with each passing year. The Prince of Wales congratulated the Queen on her remarkable achievement of serving this nation, the realms and the Commonwealth for the past 7 decades. A 39-year-old woman has been charged with the murder of a 2-year-old boy in North Yorkshire. She would appear at the Teesside Magistrates' Courts on Monday, February 7th. Senior Investigating Officer, Detective Chief Inspector Matthew Hollingsworth said officers are supporting the boy's family and they ask for privacy as they grieve. Hundreds of protesters gathered in the streets of downtown Minneapolis on Saturday, demanding justice in the fatal police shooting of a young black man, Amir Locke, during a no-knock attack on his apartment earlier this week. Demonstrators called for justice for Locke, who was killed early Wednesday morning inside a downtown Minneapolis apartment while law enforcement executed a no-knock warrant. Swedish environmental activist Greta Thunberg and members of the Nordic country's indigenous Sami community have protested against plans for the iron ore mine in northern Sweden. The government is to decide next month whether to approve the controversial project led by UK firm Beowulf, which has promised to create 250 to 300 jobs in the area.
Lata Mangeshkar, one of India's most recognizable cultural icons and the vocalist who defined music and melody for decades across South Asia, died at the age of 92. Lata was admitted to the hospital on January 11th after catching COVID-19, and she died on Sunday of multi-organ failure at Mumbai's hospital. Mariam Zian on What Follow.
Dubbed the Nightingale of India, playback song superstar Lata Mangeshkar, who died at the age of 92, reigned over Bollywood music for decades. Born on September 28, 1929 in Indore, Lata Mangeshkar began her musical training very early as her father was her tutor. Her father was himself a classical singer and theater actor, whom she said was her first and true guru. Her enormous glory had made her so indispensable that she was invited to sing in January 1963 at the commemorations of the Republic Day of India. At the commemoration, she performed a patriotic tribute to the soldiers killed in the 1962 Sino-Indian War. Back then, always wearing a long brown red dot on the forehead, she sang in more than 1,000 films and published a multitude of albums. She had some 27,000 songs in her repertoire, performed in dozens of languages, including English, Russian, Dutch, and Swahili. In 2009, the Nightingale of India received France's highest civilian award, the insignia of Officier de la Légion d'honneur. The singer broadcast a patriotic song on YouTube in March 2019, 6 months before celebrating her 90th birthday. The Nightingale of India will have sung almost until the end of her life. The Indian music legend tragically died in a hospital today in Mumbai at the age of 92.
To this point, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a reminder for our main stories. The summit of the heads of state and government of the African Union decided today in the capital of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, to suspend granting Zionist entity observer status in the Union and to form a committee of 7 heads of the state to study the issue later. Russia has assembled about 70% of the military forces needed for a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in the coming weeks. The ground is expected to freeze and harden from mid-February, enabling Moscow to bring more heavy equipment. A large part of Ukraine's most productive agricultural land is concentrated in its eastern regions, and it is precisely those parts that are most vulnerable to a possible Russian attack, which will lead to a food crisis in the country. Morocco war rescue ends in tragedy as 5-year-old Ryan is brought out dead after 5 days underground, breaking the house of workers who had dug for days to reach him and people around the world. Legend Lata Mangashkar passed away on Sunday, February 6th, leaving behind a long legacy of songs and melodies that will resound in the ears of Indians for decades to come. That's all what we have in today's bulletin. For more information, Alt24 News channel is still rolling, as well as the Alt24 network pages are available within the same title. So have an eye on it. See you tomorrow. Have a blessed evening.